Hey guys, it's Mobius Y here with another edition of Tank Talk, and here is the much procrastinated T110E5 tank review. I really should have gotten around to doing this review a lot sooner, but to be honest, I was kind of putting it off because my first, 30 or so games in this tank, I really wasn't feeling it. I really struggled getting a hang of this tank. It wasn't until my most recent, I would say probably about an additional 30 or 40 games, where I really started to get a feel for this T110E5 and just how much of a monster it can really be. This tank is just a fantastic tank to play. I love rolling out in this thing when I want somebody in our tier 10 platoons or high tier platoons to kind of just be the meat shield for people. And it's got a fantastic gun that is second only to the British L1A1 on the FV215B for heavy tanks. It's just a fantastic tank to play overall. It's got some medium tank qualities in that it's one of the more mobile heavy tanks available at tier 10. It's also got a very fast firing, consistent gun. Compared to most of the other heavy tanks, such as an E100 or an IS-7 in particular. And it's just very flexible and very adaptable to the battlefield. And that's why you see a lot of good players doing well in their E5s, as well as just a lot of people playing in E5. It's just a very flexible, adaptable, comfortable tank to play. So we're gonna do the usual, take a peek at the vulnerable portions of the tank with the armor inspector, as well as looking at where the modules and crew are located and the general stats, and then we'll get into some gameplay. But to start things off, let's take a look at the actual grind for the E5. Now, the grind for the E5, 100% totally worth it for several reasons. One, this is a great tank to have in anybody's garage. It's a wonderful tank to play in either public random battles, or even in kind of tournament style battles where tier 10 vehicles are actually allowed. It's a great tank to have in clan wars and tournament style battles for sure. Secondly, the grind itself really isn't that bad. It's a very comfortable kind of grind, a very popular kind of grind, I suppose you should say, and that just about each and every one of the tanks is very comfortable. And any player playing any of the tanks in this line should feel right at home in these US heavies. And lastly, the grind itself is really, really easy because just about every tank in the entire US heavy tank line is a gem of its own tier. So without further ado, let's go ahead and open up the US tech tree. So, starting things off in the low tiers, I won't talk much about the low tiers because they go by pretty quickly. The T1 or the T22 prototype take you over to both the T2 medium at tier 2 and the M2 medium at tier 3. These are both fairly solid and reliable tanks, at tiers 2 and 3. And then at tier 4, we get to the M3 Lee, probably the most hated tank in the game. But again, you shouldn't have this tank for too long. If you play the M3 Lee more as a kind of support tank destroyer, it's actually got a very fearsome gun. So if you hang back and let your frontline tanks get ahead of you, especially if you're even middle tier and bottom tier, your gun is powerful enough to support them from the back and get penetrating, damaging hits on even higher tiered opponents. So if you manage to get through the M3 Lee, you have a choice of going to either the M4 or the T1 Heavy. And for the US Heavy line, I definitely recommend jumping to the T1 Heavy tank, as this tank will start to get you in the mindset for US Heavy tanks. Fully upgraded, this thing is a bit more of a support heavy tank, but it's still very good at forcing the push on the enemy team, utilizing ridge lines to go hull down, peeking over only with its turret, which actually has a very strong gun mantlet, and you can deflect a lot of shots for your team with the strong frontal gun mantlet on the T1 Heavy. A nice, reliable, fast-firing, fairly accurate, good penetration gun for the final upgrade as well. Now, Tier 6, we get to the M6, which was probably my favorite of the line, to be totally honest. The M6 is fantastic with its final 90mm gun. You might want to save up just a tad of free XP to get off the stock package or even the first package, but you shouldn't need that much, if any, on the M6. If you don't have any saved up, don't worry about it. Not a big deal. You should be able to get the 90mm on the M6 fairly quickly, especially if you have gone up other tank lines. Researching the 90mm gun from either, for example, I believe the one is the T20 Tier 7 medium tank that will give you the same gun. So these packages should be fairly cheap, especially if you've really fleshed out your American tech tree. Then at Tier 7, we get to the infamous T29. Now, this tank is really good and it still maintains the mindset of go hull down, soak shots for your team, and blow the crap out of the other team. It still maintains that mentality, but it is really good at it for its tier. The turret is strong enough to deflect a lot of shots, even from tier 9 vehicles when you're bottom tier. And it gets a good enough gun where, so long as you know the vulnerable weak points of tier 9 vehicles, you can even damage them back. But at top tier, the T29 is an absolute monster to deal with when it is hull down. Now, personally, I think that T29 is quite a bit overhyped, as it's not very versatile. If it is flanked or surrounded by multiple enemies, it dies very quickly because the side armor is trash, the rear armor is also trash, and the overall mobility is just not that good. So that's just my opinion on the T29, but it is still a very good tank, very comfortable tank, and lots of people keep this in their garage because it's just so good at what it does. Now, the T32 at tier 8, a lot of people will have a hate on for this tank. Personally, I quite liked the T32. You still got the really strong turret armor going hull down from the T29, but you not only have a smaller turret, it's an even stronger turret. Even tier 10 tank destroyers will have trouble penetrating the front of your T32's turret if you are nice and safe and hull down and not exposing your hull whatsoever. You actually also get a better upper front plate on the T32, and it's a little bit more mobile than the T29. The biggest downfall of the T32 is the gun choices that you get. You still get another 90mm off the T32 and the same gun that you get on the fully upgraded T29. But, so long as you know the vulnerable points on the tanks you'll face, you should have no problems with the T32. Utilize its hull down turret armor capabilities as well as its gun depression, get shots on target, and just laugh as all sorts of rounds bounce off of your gun mantlet. Now at tier 9, you get the M103. This is when the support heavy really starts to come into shape here. If there is one tank in this whole line I recommend using free XP on, it's definitely the M103. Stock, it's not terrible, but it's really not that enjoyable either. If you recall my episode 1, my first game in episode 6 or so of Heavy Duty, where I was with the M103, or playing the M103, I should say. It did not go well whatsoever, and it was a good about 40,000, 50,000 XP just to get the first 120 mil on this tank. Sorry about that. So it's quite the grind from stock. So if you can, save up free XP for this tank or convert some if you have the extra gold available, because honestly, stock, this tank is just really not that good. It gets a lot better with the first 120mm, but you're still rocking a stock turret, so you have to start playing much more conservative, taking shots when nobody's looking with your 120mm gun. Now, fully upgraded, the M103 totally changes. When you get the upgraded turret, things change quite drastically. They've changed the packages where there is actually an extra package now sporting the first 120mm gun, but you get the final turret upgrade, which I wish was around when I was grinding this tank. So once you get that, from there it's just a straight shot to the M58 120mm gun. Once you get the final gun, that thing will just work wonders for you. It is a very consistent, reliable, heavy tank gun, and it will just work wonders for you. And with the upgraded turret, you can actually start to really play much more aggressive with the M103, soaking shots for your team. Now we get to the E5. This is a real kind of support heavy tank, honestly. But it can lead the charge in games that are not very heavy on the tier 10s, especially tier 10 tank destroyers, because its armor will absolutely stand up to just about anything that your opponents throw at it. It's also, as I said, got the second best heavy tank gun at tier 10 available to you, allowing you to get accurate, consistent, and reliable damage on the enemy team. And as I said, it's mobile enough to where it can adapt to the situation as the battle progresses, and either the enemy team's push is able to make it through your flank, or your push is able to make it through the flank, or say there's another flank that's falling. The E5 is fully capable of repositioning and lending a hand where it's needed. You can get where you need to be when you need to be there. It's mobile enough where it can actually do that. And it's just a joy to play. Honestly, I think every tank in the US heavy tank line is just absolutely fantastic. So, with a look at the grind, let's just go ahead and open up the package for the T110E5. Take a quick look at the hard stats. So, in the E5, you get an 875 horsepower engine. You don't have a great power to weight ratio, But this thing can kick up to surprisingly decent speeds, 35, sometimes 40 kilometers an hour on very favorable terrain. The E5 will surprise some people with how fast it can go for a Tier 10 heavy tank. The other aspects of its mobility is that it has 30 degrees of traverse on the tracks, which is quite low for a medium tank, but pretty dang good for a heavy tank. And the turret traverse speed itself is also 32 degrees per second. So combined, those are actually really good traverse speeds, allowing you should be able to keep up with pretty much any medium tank that tries to circle you, unless they manage to really kick up a head start and are going, 70, 80 kilometers an hour. That's pretty much just restricted to Leopard 1s and Bat Chats, though, that actually are able to get a nice downhill startup. But on flat terrain, you should be able to keep up with any medium tank trying to circle you if need be, especially if you have the clutch braking skill. The view range is, again, 400 meters, very standard for Tier 10. And lastly, we get to the gun, the real saving grace of the T110E5. You get the 120mm M58 that you have from the previous M103 fully upgraded Tier 9, but it has improved values. If I recall correctly, the T110E5's 120mm M58 actually shoots quite a bit faster than the M103's. You get six rounds per minute, so without any equipment or crew skills, you essentially have exactly a 10-second reload. But that will obviously be improved as you throw on gun rammer, you train brothers in arms on the crew. You'll have less than 10 seconds on your reload speed for sure. You are able to plant shot for shot on any other heavy tank in the game, sometimes two if they have a slow reload like on an E100. The penetration is also spectacular at 258. That is the lowest value of penetration for a medium tank, but pretty much the highest for a heavy tank at Tier 10. You also have 340 millimeters of penetration with the heat rounds. If you really need to clutch those moments and absolutely have to get your damaging hits off, you can load a little bit of heat and slap people around, keep the damage ribbons rolling in for 400 points per shot. Speaking of which, the average alpha damage is 400 points of damage for the standard AP and the heat rounds. And the HE rounds have 60 millimeters of penetration, which is not bad for a heat round at Tier 10, HE round at Tier 10, and 515 damage. So you mainly just want to reserve a couple of these for things like thinly armored TDs, like your waffles, obviously, and artillery units that you can land a nice penetrating HE round to. Now, the real amazing factors of this gun is the aim time and the accuracy. The aim time is 2 seconds exactly. That is better than the average of 2.29, and the accuracy is 0.34. Second, again, only second to the L1A1 on the British heavy tanks, the 120mm British heavy tank cannon. These values are second only to the British L1A1. These are fantastic gun handling values. 2 seconds aim time, 0.34 seconds of accuracy. You're able to poke out, aim for maybe a second tops, pop your shot off with really surprising and efficient accuracy, and get back to cover while somebody else is still trying to either line up their shot on you or even still on a reload. Just absolutely lets you work this gun and keeps racking up damage with this T110E5. So with that look at the stats, let's go ahead and look at the supplies and equipment that I use in my T110E5. Remember, this might not be ideal for everybody. This is just what works for me. So starting off, taking a look at the supplies, I mount quite a bit of heat rounds. So I only have 27 armor-piercing rounds in the T110E5. That's more than enough for a random battle, though. Absolutely. More than enough for a random battle that lasts about 10 minutes. 12 heat rounds for those clutch moments, like I said, when you just have to get those damaging hits. But in tournament battles where we are using Tier 10 vehicles, people tend to shoot a lot of premium ammo, so 12 heat rounds is more than enough in a tournament clan battle style of format of play, if Tier 10 tanks are in play. And as I said, HE shells, I only carry 3. You shouldn't need more than maybe 5 HE shells. But you can be a lot more lenient with your ammo loadout, as the E5 carries a pretty generous amount of ammunition. Consumables, very standard for Tier 10 for me. Large repair kit, large first aid kit, automatic fire extinguisher. The first aid kit, I highly recommend you mount a large first aid kit. Your commander is in that ever so common cupola on the top of the turret that everybody loves to shoot, and that will get your commander killed a lot. So mounting a large first aid kit will help protect him from that. You could also train pain tolerance on the crew to increase his protection even further. He'll still die, without a doubt, but it will help reduce the odds of that happening. It will also help reduce it happening overall. And the automatic fire extinguisher, again, I definitely recommend. If anybody can get on your sides or even behind you, put shots into your engine deck. It's very easy for this tank to catch fire, just like pretty much every other U.S. heavy tank down the entire line. And the large repair kit, totally up to you if you just want to mount a small. I like the large repair kits at tier 10 because they repair all of my modules if I get hit by a big HE shell from artillery or even a TD with a large caliber gun and I lose multiple modules, I can repair all of them quickly, plus the little 10% boost to repairing of modules, especially the tracks, indispensable on a heavy tank like the T110E5. So let's take a look at the equipment that I mount now. This should look very familiar. Large caliber tank gun rammer, vertical stabilizer Mark II, and coated optics. This is a very common setup that I use on my medium tanks. And I'm totally okay with that. This thing is essentially a very big medium tank, if you think about it. With its mobility, it's very consistent gun, but it's got heavy tank armor values. Absolutely. And I feel that the team really benefits with this setup here. I can use the gun rammer to get my shots off as quickly as possible. The vertical stabilizer helps maintain the accuracy when the tank is moving or the turret is rotating so that I can snap those shots off quicker than anybody who does not mount a vertical stabilizer. And I like the coated optics because this tank is actually capable of outspotting bigger tanks than it, namely Waffles. The T110E5 is actually smaller than an M48 Patton, so provided both players have the exact same crew skills and even the same equipment and whatnot on a T110E5 versus an M48 Patton, the E5 should outspot the Patton, to be totally honest. You can even outspot an E50M if need be, but I feel that view range is really essential on a tank such as this. It's totally up to you. You could totally switch out coated optics for something like improved ventilation, hands down. That would probably be one of my top optional choices. Other optional choices for sure. Toolbox plus 25% to repair speed. If you want to be a mega troll, you could train repairs, track mechanic, throw a toolbox on the equipment as well as a large repair kit. Your tracks will repair in like 2 seconds every time they get taken out. There's really not much else you can pick aside from the improved ventilation, like I said, which would improve your reload speed. It would also improve the gun handling, just a little bit overall. You could throw on improved ventilation just to enhance all those aspects. And probably the third choice, maybe a large spall liner to help reduce splash damage from artillery. This thing is quite a bit of an artillery magnet for sure because it's a big tier 10 heavy tank. Artillery loves shooting these things for sure. So that's essentially a look at the supplies and equipment that I use on the T110E5. We're going to go ahead and open up tanks.gg and take a look at the armor profile and soft stats very quickly here in just a second. Excuse me. So taking a look at the armor profile on tanks.gg, we're actually largely going to ignore this because the armor profile on the E5 on PC has been buffed compared to the console version, namely this Commander's Cupola. These values are stupid high now. Medium tanks will have trouble penetrating this on PC, but it's not the case on Xbox. So I'm simply just going to show you where you want to shoot an E5. You don't want to shoot it in this thick belt right here where the lower front plate and the upper front plate meet because it's just retardedly thick. The upper front plate itself is actually one of the best in the game. You wouldn't think so by looking at it, but it actually is. You've got values going as high as 460. So don't bother shooting at that whatsoever. Where you want to hit an E5 frontally is right here in the middle of the lower plate. You don't want to hit it off to the sides as the values do increase and you might get a troll bounce because of the funny roundness of the lower front plate. You want to try and hit it right in the very middle of the lower front plate. If you're at a slight angle, you definitely want to hit it in the sides here, right behind the drive wheel, or even from the other side. Right behind the drive wheel there. Very low values, as low as 160, going only as high as about 200 millimeters. Lots of tier 8s and tier 9s will have an easy time penetrating that. And of course, on the Xbox, you can hit this Commander's Cupola up here. Where you want to shoot it is actually if you're facing it on this right side here. Because on the opposite side is that little machine gun that sticks out, and you can get a very troll auto bounce there if you decide to try and shoot there. Other spots to shoot an E5, if you have an E5, an enemy E5 that's actually being very stupid, and you see something like, oh, how is it? If they're coming around a corner at you like this, you should be laughing because you can easily shoot them in the front drive wheel. Not only will it penetrate and track them, but there's a very good chance that you'll do damage. You're getting values as low as 78 millimeters. That should be an easy penetration for any tier 8 or tier 9 tank on an E5, no problem. Other things you can do, if you come across an E5 who actually has its turret turned away from you like so, not so much in the front of the turret. You don't want to shoot in the front of the turret. You want to shoot more into the back of the turret or the middle where the values are much lower. Of course, the turret would have to be turned a little bit more, but one of the gimmicks of American turrets is that they're quite weak on the sides. So a turret turned away from you on an E5, shoot it there. You'll have the damage rimmers rolling off in no time. Other aspects of the E5, the side armor is complete trash, about 100 millimeters, 120 millimeters if you count the tracks with the spaced armor. Side of the turret, flat on, it's only about 145, especially in the back. The rear of the turret, 76 millimeters. The rear of the hull, less than 40 millimeters. And the other side, same story as the other one there. So the E5, frontally, it's extremely strong. But like a lot of American tanks, especially the heavy tanks, if you can come around on its sides or even its rear, you've got very easy penetrations all around in those areas. So let's take a look at the soft stats and the gun constraints. The nice thing about the E5 is it's very comfortable even for newer players, and that's part of the reason why this line is so popular. You've got 8 degrees of gun depression almost all the way around the tank with 15 degrees of gun elevation. The only difference where that is you only have 5 degrees of gun depression at the very back of the tank looking over your engine deck. But apart from that, very, very good and comfortable levels of gun depression all the way around the tank, so you can really work those hills if you need to. So couple values of soft stats. We'll just compare it to the M103 of the Tier 9. Excuse me, the Tier 9 heavy tank of the US tech tree there. So as I said, the gun is actually better performing in the T110E5 than the M103 for a number of reasons. You have better dispersion when moving, traversing the tank, and traversing the turret. Just a slight boost in all areas there, but it will be a noticeable boost for sure. The terrain resistances are pretty much identical to the M103, so the mobility should feel the same. Differences there, obviously you have better hull and turret armor on the front you have better hull and turret armor on the front of the E5 compared to the M103. Just a better armor profile overall. And you also have a better power to weight ratio, so you will accelerate a little bit better with the E5 compared to the M103. So that's basically a brief look at the T110E5. Where you want to shoot a T110E5. I didn't really get much into the armor profile, but essentially areas you don't want to shoot an E5. If the turret is facing you, obviously avoid the gun mantlet unless you have super high penetration APCR, aka you're a tier 10 TD that does not shoot heat for premium rounds. The sides of the turret if it's facing you, and obviously anywhere on the upper front plate. Those are generally the areas you want to avoid shooting. The entire lower front plate, in the very middle, if it's facing you directly, you want to shoot in the very middle. In the sides, if it's even just slightly angled, even in the side of the turret right here on the commander's cupola for sure. Sides of the turret, if the turret's turned too far, or if they're over angling, this drive wheel right here, shoot that, you'll track them and you'll damage them. So that's a pretty good look at the T110E5. Let's go ahead and take a look at the crew and module locations. So looking at the photos from WOTinfo.net, on the front of the T110E5, as I said, the entire lower plate pretty much is a weak point there, and you've got the cupola on the top of the turret. Now, if somebody actually does penetrate your upper front plate because they're above you shooting down, and they hit right in the middle where those viewports are, they can knock out your driver. Sometimes he gets killed by a tier 10 TD shooting right through your front armor, so that's part of the reason why I recommend a large first aid kit and or pain tolerance trained on your crew. On the left side, you can see the front of the hull underneath the turret. There's lots of ammo rack there. Train safe stowage on your crew because this can get shot a lot, especially if you get flanked. And if your ammo rack gets damaged, one of the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? One of the biggest pros of your tank, the reload speed, is just gone. And you're forced to use your repair kit on it. Obviously, on the left side of the turret, you've got the gunner near the front. If he gets knocked out, there goes your gun's accuracy, and the commander can get killed in the very middle of the turret beneath the cupola, but he can also get killed by shooting the cupola itself. You've got fuel tanks and engine deck along the back of the hull, especially behind the rear drive wheel. For sure, those can get shot out when you're flanked, and it can set easy fires if somebody manages to flank you and they know where you're shooting you. The very back of the E5, you've got more ammo rack in the very rear of the turret where it's very thin. I believe only 76 millimeters, if you recall. And the very back of the hull is all engine deck. So if you get behind an E5, shoot it in either one of those places. Personally, I try going for turret shots if possible. Ammo racking in E5 really cripples an E5. But if you can't manage that, just shoot it right between the tracks in the hull area. You'll probably either damage or knock out its engine and maybe even set it on fire. And then on the right side of the E5, again, you have the ammo rack in the front of the hull underneath the turret. You've got more ammo rack in the very rear of the turret on the right-hand side. You've also got the loader sitting on the right side of the turret, basically where the commander would be on the opposite side. If you manage to get a shot in the right side of a T110E5 turret, either shoot it in the very back to knock out the ammo rack or near the middle to try and knock out the loader. And again, on the hull, you've got more fuel tanks and engine deck behind the rear drive wheel as well as underneath the turret behind the tracks. So shoot those areas. Maybe you'll get lucky. Maybe you'll set the tank on fire. Whatever. Who knows? We'll see. So that's basically a look at the T110E5. It's a very tough tank to play for newer players, as well as a very comfortable tank to play for newer players. It's kind of tit for tat. It's a little bit weird to explain, but veteran players just seem to know how to make this tank dance. A couple tricks you want to do with the E5 to really make the armor profile sing. You want to wiggle both your turret and your hull where possible. If you're hull down and your hull is protected and only your turret is exposed when you shoot at enemies, wiggle the turret after your shot. It'll throw off other people's aim and cause more troll bounces. Just make sure not to wiggle it too much, exposing the weak sides of the turret for sure. And if you are not hull down and you have to pull out, exposing pretty much your whole tank to take your shot, by all means, wiggle your hull. It will cause so many troll bounces, even on your lower plate. It will drive enemies nuts. And that's one of the saving graces of the E5, is that if you really get a feel for the tank, you can throw a couple extra little tricks in there to throw other people off their game and keep your awesome heavy tank gun singing. So let's jump into some gameplay now. I've got 2 games lined up for you. Hopefully this won't take too long. I was hoping to keep this video to 30 minutes roughly, but that was quite an extensive time going in depth on the T110E5. So this first game is on the Xbox 360. I'm not platooned, and we're playing Team Destruction on Siegfried Line. You're going to see a couple examples of using the E5 in a city environment, as it is a top tier heavy tank, so it definitely excels in a city environment when it is very top tier, such as in this game. There's only 5 tier 10s on each side, and only one of those tier 10s on each side is a tank destroyer, for sure. So, as a team destruction game, the objective is to destroy all enemy tanks. There's no flag to worry about capturing, so I don't so much have to worry about falling back to defend a base as I have to worry about falling back to defend the rear flank if a really bad situation like that arises. But apart from that, it's pretty much just find the enemy, attack them, and just deal as much damage as I can without getting killed too early myself. You'll notice here that one of my subscribers, Call of Wolves, is in an RU-251 Tier 8 German scout tank as well. Bit of a shout out to one of my subscribers here. And I'll touch base more on that later. So, a map like Siegfried Line, with a gun as accurate and consistent as a T110E5, you could play this tank out in the field and snipe with it for sure, if you have a spotter. If you don't have a spotter, you're pretty much useless sitting out there. But because of the armor profile of the T110E5, where it can deflect shots even from top-tier tank destroyers, maybe not reliably, 100% reliably, but fairly consistently, you really want to utilize your armor where it is going to be needed most. And that is absolutely the city, where the other heavily armored, big-gunned tanks are going to be. So pulling forward, the only thing we've spotted so far is the enemy object 430. Call of Wolves is going to pull up here and show why I try to avoid platooning with subscribers, because I tend to just get subscribers killed. That is totally my bad. Call of Wolves, I apologize. I just went and got him killed. Unfortunately, my cruise control stopped, so I parked right behind where he needed to back up to, and I was just in his way, allowing the enemy waffle to clip him out and kill him. So I apologize, Call of Wolves, that was totally my fault right there. But I'm hoping to repay the enemy team in kind for taking out one of my subscribers. Anyways, back on the game at hand here, I tried pushing out Call of Wolves' corpse so that I could actually side scrape effectively around this corner. peeking out just a little bit too far. You'll see that my tracks are a little bit too exposed, but this is what makes the E5 a good tank for side scraping. The tracks are actually really wide. Now, the side, as I said, the side armor is quite trash. It's only, 70 some odd millimeters behind the tracks adding an extra 20 millimeters of spaced armor. But the E5 is still a good side scraping tank, which is always a handy thing to have for a tier 10 heavy tank because the tracks are wide enough where they will absorb shots. If you were counting there, I actually absorbed 4 shots from the enemy Waffenträger off E100. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to capitalize on it enough as I planted 2 shots into the upper front plate of the E100. I wasn't happy about that, hence the great shot ping right there. So this enemy E100, he's kind of has an idea of what he's doing. He is side scraping quite well off that corner, but he's not angling his turret whatsoever. So I loaded up some heat rounds. 340 penetration is enough to go through the front of an E100's turret. Trying to take up this E100, but my shot just barely misses, letting the E100 live to slap somebody for another 750 alpha at some point. So I kept my heat round loaded. I also knew the Waffle was still over there, still alive, so I didn't want to rush in and face his potential fully reloaded gun and just get smashed for all of my HP. I held my shot on the E100 side skirt there, as all the spaced armor would simply absorb the heat round. That's something you need to be wary of when you're using the heat rounds on this tank. While they have good penetration, you need to know where to shoot and where to hold your fire. Standard AP rounds can penetrate things like the side skirts of an E100, but heat rounds will not, as the 60 to 80 millimeters of spaced armor, whatever it is, on those side skirts will simply eat a heat round and an HE round, and you will essentially do no damage. So I held my shot there, decided to pull forward as my current position was no longer cutting the mustard for me. So seeing the enemy Waffle pulling in on the right, I knew he was priority 1, so I simply tried to reposition as best as I could and pull out to where I could get a shot on this guy. I figured he was completely side on, so I didn't really bother aiming. I simply right bumper, right trigger, bam, 408. He's down to 1 shot. Friendly E100 takes him out, knocking out probably their most dangerous tank on the enemy team right now. So that was a really relieving moment. I felt I'd redeemed myself for getting Call of Wolves killed by making sure that Waffle paid the price for it. So I see our STI is actually doing a really good job face-hugging this enemy T32 and E100, so I decided to capitalize on it, putting a shot in the lower plate of the E100, putting more damage on him. Upon seeing the T32 was actually 1 shot, I tried to take him out first, but he gets destroyed at the last second, so I switched targets on the E100's top police bar. Trying to get a damage hit on him, I successfully roll. Unfortunately, our STI is killed, but right there is an example of putting the E5's mobility through its paces. You can actually do a drive-by similar to like you would with a medium tank because the gun is consistent and accurate enough, and the mobility on the E5 is just enough where you can actually pull a maneuver like that. So I simply drove up beside him, planted a shot through his side skirt with a standard AP shell, and took him out of the game. And that's when artillery slapped me for about 800 hit points, 700 hit points. So the hunt is on for the enemy artillery units, simply to mop up this game. The Waffle takes out their last heavy tank, I believe it was a Tiger II, and that's when I spotted the GW Tiger that was responsible for shaving off a fair portion of my HP. So I simply pulled forward, got the first shot in him, pulled forward again to line up another shot, and right there you can see the quick aim time at work on the T110E5. Hardly any time aiming whatsoever, and I just snapped the shot off when the reticule was small enough that the entire artillery piece was filling it. So I pulled the trigger, took him out. Friendly Bat Chat takes out the second artillery piece, and we have secured the victory on Siegfried Line. So not a very long game, pretty quick, still racking up 3264 in damage. Pretty good game, pretty good result there. Unfortunately, I made some crucial mistakes, not supporting the friendly STI soon enough, or sorry, ST1 soon enough against that enemy E100 and T32. Also, completely screwing Call of Wolves over, preventing him from doing anything whatsoever that game by getting him totally killed. Again, I really apologize for that, Call of Wolves. That was totally my bad. So the second game here on Serene Coast. This is a new map. I've only played it maybe a dozen, 15 times at the time of uploading this video, but I've already come to like it, and I tend to play on the west side of the map, in the A1, A2, A3, and... sorry, in the C123, D123, E123 kind of area. That area there seems to be the most comfortable for me, so I wind up going that way a lot. So taking a look at the team composition, it's a very tier 10 game this time around. 6 per side, as well as a lot of tier 9s, including a full platoon, or not so much a platoon, but a full triage of E50s on the other team. They've also got 2 E4 tier 10 US tank destroyers and a Death Star, so stuff that I need to watch out for sure. So pushing up on the west side of the map, my left side here, not really knowing what to expect. People still don't really know what to do on this map, so you kind of tend to catch people unawares if they wind up doing something completely different from your team's tactics. In this case, we wound up facing off against many lower tier tanks, so I was able to kind of sort of just bully my way into their faces and soak shots for the friendlies around me, as well as inflict a lot of damage on the enemies, for sure. So upon pulling forward and spotting these 2 enemy tanks, I'm still unspotted. This is part of the reason why I really like using optics on the E5, as it can outspot some tanks sometimes. Especially if you have a well-trained crew on it with things like even just camouflage, brothers in arms, or something silly like recon and situational awareness. I like having optics on the E5 for that reason. Luckily, I did not get spotted, because if I had been, that could have been some very easy damage for somebody else shooting me in the side there. So I decided to pull to the left, get behind this hill that I am now behind, and just cover myself until I actually get to the position I want to be, which is this ridge right here in front of this enemy Tiger II and E50. This is the only opposition we've got on this side of the map, so I tried to get the teammates to focus fire on the E50, as he was currently the more dangerous of the two. So my first shot bounced off the side of his turret, second shot right through the front of his turret, just outside his gun mantlet. That's where you want to shoot an E50 or an E50M, excuse me. He'll penetrate just about every time. It's only about 180 millimeters of armor in the front of an E50 turret. So E50's still not turning towards me. I'm able to plant another shot in the side of his turret after bouncing my third shot. And that's when the FV-215B 183 gets spotted in the very back. I decided we're going to have to save him for later. We've got to take out his eyes first, so I continue to bounce shots off of this E50's gun mantlet, poorly aiming my shots, but pulling forward for one more hit into his commander's cupola. Again, poorly aimed shot, misses altogether, and this is when our AMX 5120 decides it's time to pull forward and take these guys out. So the 5120 actually manages to distract the E50 long enough for me to plant another shot in the side of his turret behind the gun mantlet. Friendlies take up the Tiger II, and that's when I plant my shot on the enemy Death Star, and the Death Star actually shot me with an HE round and bounced off. At the very last second, I turned my tank away from him, causing his shell to hit me at an automatic ricochet angle, dealing 0 damage to me. Now that's pretty surprising, considering the 183's AP shell has pretty much the highest penetration in the game, behind a T92's AP shell. So pulling forward, the Death Star's trying to run away because he has no more support, aside from this IS-8 on my right-hand side. But the Death Star is definitely a priority, as he is the more dangerous of the two at this current moment. So friendly Tortoise manages to snipe him out, taking him out of the game. And this is when I decide I can actually throw my weight around. I'm full health. I can push on this IS-8, soak up some damage from my friendlies, who have taken a lot of shots in the opening engagements of this battle, for sure. Unfortunately for this IS-8, he gets absolutely surrounded and reamed. Poor guy. So upon doing so, a quick look at the map, we have been vastly overmatched on the other side of the map there. So we have a lot of enemy tanks bearing down on our flag. It is past time we turn around and try to defend the base here. An enemy AMX 5120 comes in, trying to take out our 54E1. Unfortunately, my second shot onto him actually hits the porch on this house here. I'm just trying to get in his face, soak shots with the 54E1, try to keep the 54E1 alive. Unfortunately, it's not the case. My last shot on that 5120 completely misses the side of his armor. Somebody else manages to get the kill shortly afterwards, though, so it wasn't a total loss. And I was more concerned about getting back to the base to reset it. However, all 5 of their heavy tanks that were on that side of the map just pile onto the flag. There's no way we're going to get back there in time, so I simply pull right in front of this E4. I block his APCR round off of my front, Unfortunately, he blocks my shot with the front of his barrel, so he prevents me from one more damaging shot, and we lose out to a base capture. Not a bad move on their part, as there was about twice of us in numbers than them, and we would have simply come back and overwhelmed them, absolutely smashing them off of our flag for sure. So not a bad decision by them to decide to just sit on the flag and cap us out there. Good play by the red team. Still racking up 3,500 damage that game with the T110E5, just putting it through its paces, putting that gun to serious work when I felt like actually aiming my shots. So guys, that's a look at the T110E5. I apologize for the length of this video. I was hoping to make it shorter, but I wanted to try and be as detailed as possible with this thing. So the key instances for the E5 that you want to do when you actually do manage to get this tank is, if you find yourself very top tier and there's only maybe 2 tier 10s on each team, you can definitely throw your weight around, make your armor work, soak shots for your friendlies, and keep that gun singing. The gun is very accurate, very reliable for a heavy tank, absolutely. But its downside is that it has the lowest alpha damage of the tier 10 heavy tanks. So you need to keep yourself in the game, planting your shots as accurately and consistently as possible, dealing damage every shot, if you can manage it. When you find yourself facing off against bigger caliber guns, such as more tier 10 TDs or even heavy tanks, and in a much more tier 10 heavy game, you definitely want to make use of wiggling your armor. Just rock your hull back and forth if you're not hull down, and if you are hull down, just wiggle your turret back and forth to throw the aim off of the enemy tanks as much as possible. So I hope that guys gave you a good look on the T110E5. This is a great tank to play. I love playing it now that I've got a really solid grasp on it. And the grind itself for this tank, I didn't find too bad. Other people's opinions might differ on it, but personally I found every heavy tank down the US heavy tank line to be just an absolute joy to play. So this has been Mobius Y. Thanks very much for watching this edition of Tank Talk. I hope to see you on the battlefield or in my next video. And as always, happy tanking.